Hi there, this video is for the Permaculture Design Michigan group. My name is James and I'm one of the admins. I've been inspired to make this video mostly by Darren Anderson because I saw that when he was put on as an admin to one of the groups, he he was so humbled and honored, and he has now started to contribute in a different way, I feel. And it was really inspiring to me because I don't know, I guess um, I've been part of some of the groups, especially Permaculture Honduras, which is Honduras Permacultura and Permacultura, if I can say it right. So um, I never really interacted in that way, okay, and posting things. Um, but this group, Permaculture Design, Michigan, is more for local, okay? So meaning that the people who are involved in it are from Michigan, okay? They don't have to be, but the Great Lakes I consider to be the center of the Great Lakes region, okay? So if you have any interest in Michigan, you're not going to be excluded from this group because you're not from Michigan. But there were some political reasons, as I'll mention as well, because of some political posts that come up in the groups. But that's another discussion. For now, I'm really excited to show you some books, okay? And I'll tell you about how I learned about permaculture really quick. After I served in the Air Force for 6 years, I traveled the US for about 6 months, and during that time, I visited intentional communities and other projects. I visited friends, family, but one of the biggest impacts was I met Jacques Fresco, and I met him. I spent 8 hours with him on two separate occasions. I visited him, and he was all about design, okay? The word design. And I didn't realize it then, but it was really a precursor to understanding and learning permaculture, okay? So what I ended up doing was I was going to study at Rutgers sociology, okay, in Jersey, but instead I ended up going to a university called MUM, or Maharishi University of Management. So that's in Iowa, which sounds completely obscure. And what the heck is a Maharishi, right? Well, um, long story short, it's a guy who taught a lot of people TM, or transcendental meditation, in the 60s and 70s. He was famous for teaching celebrities, especially the Beatles, and ended up forming a university. And at this university, they have a sustainable living program because I Googled sustainable living degree to see if such a thing existed. I was just trying to figure out what to do with my life and what the world needed. I wanted to make good use of my time in my life. So when I went there in 2013, I attended a permaculture course, which is a college course. And most PDCs, a PDC means permaculture design course, and they're usually a 2 week course. I think it comes to, is it 72 hours? Whatever 2 weeks is. I don't know how the math is done, but mine it ends up being a 3 week course, and that's a college. It was a college course. So the guy who taught me permaculture was an engineer, and his name is Lonnie Gamble. So if by any chance he sees this, he was a great inspiration, and I also give this video in the style of what I like to call the Lonnie Gamble Ramble, which, no offense to Lonnie, okay, he's a talkative guy, and he's definitely taught classes in different ways. He did a lot for me, especially during those times, and all the students. He really inspired a lot of people. But one of the many styles of teaching that I remember, because there's all different kinds, is a style where you literally are dumping, you're downloading all the information. So there's a lot of stuff that you can learn, like websites, books, that just by knowing that website or that book, it's really going to help you speed up the process. And Lonnie was the kind of guy where he could just go off for an hour and name books and movies, and he would show you short videos, and everything is just blowing your mind. I mean, each piece of information is a whole another world, okay? So I'm going to show you some of the books I have here. And I'm from Flint, Michigan. In fact, I'm in Montreal now, but a lot of well, as anyone who's learning permaculture knows, you can design in different climates, okay? And the temperate zone is known for being actually the heaviest by weight. I think produces more than even, you would think that the tropical zone produces more, but if I remember correctly, it's the temperate zone actually by weight you can produce a lot more. So um, one good thing that Lonnie taught me was about the this book, which is Edible Forest Gardens, Volume 1, and there's a Volume 2 here. And these are prized books. I bought two sets, one for a friend in Flint, and he keeps a small permaculture library for us there. Now, in the back of Volume 1, and you can get a PDF of this online. You don't have to buy these books. They're very expensive, okay? And they're very technical. It's like a technical manual. It might not be the best idea for a newbie to even consider. It can be very intimidating, just like the original manual, okay, is very intimidating because it's very dense and it's filled with technical terms. Okay, here it is. It's called The Top 100 Species, okay? This, I would say, if you're in Michigan, this might be your golden ticket, okay? Because it's like a plug-and-play system. And when I design for people, I often say it's plug-and-play, meaning they say, I want this and this and this, and I say, look, we have to establish fertility. You got to figure 3 years minimum for soil, okay? I'm going to create that fertility, and as that time passes, we can decide, as we learn about this space, we can design it as such, okay? In any way that you want, and things can be changed. I learned from one gardener, actually a couch surfing host in upstate New York. Her friend who was a gardener said, the idea of moving plants like house furniture. That's an idea you can use because don't be afraid to move certain plants. But of course, no, certain plants, some plants put up with it better than others, okay? But you can move plants more than you might think. But in this book, in the back, this 100 species, it's plug and play for temperate zone, okay? Which calls to mind another piece of the Lonnie Gamble Ramble, which is the tcpermaculture.com. I think it has a good graphic of a forest garden if it's still there. That's a good resource, okay? This is great. And the first one is theory, okay, vision and theory, okay? And this one is design and practice. So volume 2 actually is probably a lot more interesting, I think. But they're just chock full of all kinds of stuff. It's got all the technical terminology, everything you could want. Now, if you're a newbie to permaculture, this book I would recommend. It's called The One Straw Revolution. The lighting is terrible. This is a low quality video, but it doesn't matter. I'm just stoked, and I'm going to show you this stuff. This is The One Straw Revolution, Fukuoka, okay? So when I was going to Maharishi, one of the things we would always say is, I'm going to Fukuoka that shit. That means I'm going to do a lazy, natural, no work farming, okay? But of course, it's a misnomer. If you read this book, you'll say he says you'll be disappointed if you think there's no work involved. Well, that's true. But what you find is that with traditional methods, and not just in agriculture, okay, in modern society, there's a tendency to create work for the sake of work, okay, because we need to stay busy and seem like we're working, even if it's not necessarily that productive, okay. And there's a quote that goes around. There's many quotes of Fukuoka that go around, and one of them was in meme form, okay, and one of them was about work and how the idea of work seems ridiculous. Birds don't have jobs, they don't pay taxes, okay, and they're fine. So why is it that we rush around doing all these things when just providing for our basic needs, okay? This is something that seems to be lost. Now, this is a Japanese fellow. He's long dead now, but this is in the 70s, I believe, and he was using the term natural farming, and anyone who knows about this stuff now knows that natural on food labels, etc., is a word that is basically meaningless. Similarly to the word organic becoming overused, okay? But back then, natural farming, that meant it meant what we mean now, which is no spray, no synthetic chemical inputs, no machinery. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a purist about it, okay? So if you're a newbie, I would definitely recommend this book. And if you've never read this book and you're into permaculture, this is the Zen permaculture book. It's I don't know, not even 200 pages, okay? My girlfriend already read this. I actually got this for her, and I've been listening. I just am about halfway through the audiobook now, but it is just so rich in information, and it's really embodying all of what is in this manual, okay? Now, this is the Bible. It's a designer's manual, okay? That I think is the key word in this group. It's Permaculture Design, Michigan. I think design is a word that is left out, and it's really important to remember that, because permaculture is becoming, it's really blowing up, and people are using it in all different ways, and that's great. One of the things I like about it is that it's an all-inclusive, holistic way of thinking. It's like a all-in-one, okay? And it's not perfect, but I haven't seen anything quite like it. And when I discovered it, especially the 7-layer food forest, which you can do in almost any climate. I think Arctic, you can only do like 4 layers, okay? If that's even true, I can't recall. But you can do the layer system, okay, is a system that is very easy to understand. And I'm not going to get into those details now, but I'll tell you this. This book is basically out of print. It's very expensive to buy. And this is printed. I get the PDF. I went to the local print shop, and it's like $30, okay? It's got one color page, and the rest is black and white. But the photos in this book, just to see the illustrations, if I can pull one up, I mean, the examples that you can see. And when I took my permaculture class, we had a book called Introduction to Permaculture, which is like a 100-page book, and it's a condensed version, all the good stuff, you know, because this is a daunting book, but this is it's a credit to humanity. I mean, it might end up being one of the most important books ever written, okay? I mean, people are still learning what permaculture is, but that's one thing I love about being here in Montreal is that people know what it is. Way more than I found in the United States, okay? Except you have to say it with a French accent. If you say permaculture, they're like, oh, quoi? And you say permaculture, and they're like, oh, permaculture. Okay, so you got to French it up, but look, it's got everything. I mean, from beginning to end. And that's one thing that's been coming up in these groups is, you know, people post something political, and it might seem like it has nothing to do with permaculture, because it's about the election or whatever. But everything we do is a political act, and this permaculture is. I would argue that permaculture is the most political act there is. Okay, and it's true. I don't agree that posting memes about, you know, that's just going to cause arguments. It's not necessarily solution-oriented thinking, which is, right? We say permaculture is about solution-oriented thinking. The solution is the problem is the solution. Okay, so we're not getting bogged down in how, when, and why. Even though those things are important, we want to design, and just by designing. And I mentioned Jacques Fresco. He was really something I couldn't understand, which is how is it that just by designing the way the roads are, the way the houses are, how is it that that is going to solve the problem? Well, it's not something that is obvious immediately, so you got to dig into it. And if you look at the permaculture flower, you will see that everything is included. Okay, so there's nothing that isn't permaculture by this system. Bill Mollison said in one of the PDCs that I saw, he said a young person had mentioned to him, hey, permaculturists don't use gasoline. And he said this one does. Because with a can of gasoline and a heavy machine, you can create a structure that lasts 1,000 years. Now, we can't, there's no such thing as carbon neutral or being 100% sustainable. I had a friend that would often say you get to sustainability in baby steps. And I think that's a good rule of thumb. Use what you have to get out of it, okay? And so once you become aware of it, that's great. That's anything you can do, but becoming aware of it is a great step. And don't try to be a purist about it. Just try to get somewhere better than where you are now. If we all did that, we'd be well on the way. So this is graph paper, right? This is grid paper. It's very good for designing. Good thing to have. So I'm going to rifle through some of these books. We're at 15 minutes. This is a long video, but it's going to be okay. Strictly Medicinal Seeds. Now, I'm not necessarily saying you should get this one, okay? But any seed catalogs are great. And this one, I'll tell you, just by thumbing through this and reading the descriptions, you can learn a lot, okay? A lot of things about what plants are, what they do. It tells you what zone they grow in. So again, it's not necessarily it's kind of a plug and play, okay? Maybe not as good and or as specific as the top 100 species in the back of Edible Forest Gardening Volume 1, but it's a great resource, okay? This is one I found, Calendar of Organic Gardening. I don't really use it that much, but I thumbed through it, and it's fun sometimes to look at older books, okay? Just to see little gems of knowledge. Birds, something I did in my job as an airport manager was managing birds. And one thing I like about birds is that it's one of the species that you can see interacting. So you can't see arthropods, you can't see insects, sometimes you can't see critters because they come at night. But birds are something you can observe with your eyes, you can see them a lot, and you can see how they interact with the space, and you can design according to that. In fact, especially if you're in an urban area, designing it so that the cats cannot reach the birds very easily, especially if you're feeding birds. That's a very important consideration. Cats shouldn't really be left out. If they are, they should absolutely have a bell around their collar. But you can walk a cat on a leash. They really like it, and you can train them to do that. And instead of being locked inside their whole life, which maybe is kind of cruel, you can walk them. And they destroy a lot of songbirds. They decimate those populations. So this is communitiesic.org, okay? Now, this is another Lonnie Gamble Ramble tip, okay? So 5 websites, ic.org. IC means intentional community. This is the big book. You don't need to buy this. You can see it online. You can subscribe and have access to it, okay? It's got all the listings. And there are a few more. Couchsurfing, okay? You should know couchsurfing. Last I knew, they were in trouble and were trying to stay afloat, but I'm not sure how that's going now. Very valuable resource. The other 3 are work exchanges. Most people know woofing, WWOOF. There's Woof USA, and then there's Woof International. So that's woofing, organic work exchange, organic farming work exchange. Then you have helpx.net and workaway.info. Now those are farms as well. Some are hostels, bed and breakfast, all kinds of different things. Another great resource. Many communities, people doing permaculture. Okay, this is a little field guide. It's just a fun. It's not even a complete one. I found it, a little free library or something. You know, it's funny. I've had this forever, and I was thumbing through it recently. I went on a nature walk, and I saw the club moss, and there are several different subspecies here. And it's just, I don't know what it is. It's just fun to look at these. And horsetail, yeah, I knew that one as a kid, right? There's mushrooms in here. This is called a bird's nest, right? So fun resources. This is one of my favorite books I got at Totem Books in Flint, How to Prune Almost Everything. And I tell you, I keep this next to the table. And when I'm eating, I before and after meals, I flip it open and I just read, and it's just kind of a crash course in almost every single plant that you would want to prune. And it's an older book, but it's still good information. So shade gardening, very valuable stuff. Perennials for shade. These aren't necessarily permaculture plants. In fact, there are a lot of plants that maybe you don't want, but a lot of the principles of shade gardening are there, and shade is a big consideration. And look at these, look, this is just an example of a design, right? That almost looks like a permaculture design. They're talking about, where the sun is, where the house is. This is permaculture design, okay? This is good stuff. So this is hardcore design stuff, and I'm going to show you now what I would consider like what we call social permaculture. as if, and this is a misnomer, okay? It's, people say social permaculture, they say this permaculture, that permaculture. It's nice, it's great that they're making these divisions, but it's as if to say that they're not part of the same thing, okay? The social construct that brings people together around the apple tree is often, I find, more important than the tree itself, because otherwise that fruit will fall to the ground and rot. Same with a community garden, okay? If a garden is a job, okay? A design is the backdrop. It's just where the drama goes down, okay? In the future, this is how it will be. Parks, front yards, it will all be designed like this, okay? So this stuff's been around for a while, and it's just now starting to catch fire, and it's just going to go more and more, because who wouldn't want a Garden of Eden dripping with fruit and berries, medicinal plants, food, tea, and medicine, all the good stuff, right? So let me see this one. This is one I found in a little free library, Canadian, essential Canadian gardening stuff. You know, I barely looked at this, but it's just a free resource. Why not? You know, just some traditional ideas. I don't want to be that hardcore about being, you know, we say a hippie, as if hippies are doing permaculture. Well, this is true, but they're some of the first ones to get into it. But if you look, there's a lot of right-wing type people too, like preppers, self-reliant people. This is just good all-around information. You don't have to be a hippie to do permaculture. I have a beard, okay? Trust me, I didn't even know I had a beard like this. Everyone thinks I'm a hippie because I have a beard and long hair. But there was a time, trust me, when I didn't. I have sensitive skin. That's part of the reason why I have a beard. So I don't want to shave all the time. So I'm in Canada, Montreal. And so knowing about your local environment is great. Voices from French Ontario. This is, in Quebec, people speak French. And it's a big political struggle that, you know, we learn a little about in the school in the United States, but it goes a lot deeper than you might think. I'm listening to an audiobook right now. It's the People's History of Quebec, and it's really fascinating stuff. So this is about the French-speaking in Ontario, and Acadia, which is east of Quebec, all that area, there's all their French-speaking communities. So it's interesting. And, you know, any way I can sell permaculture to the Frenchies, like the Quebecers, okay? French polyculture, talking about how to make the gardens French and not English, right? This appeals to them. Plus, they're more interested in art, design, food. It's a lot easier to do permaculture here. They're really much more open to this stuff. Green alleys and all this good stuff. So one way to describe permaculture is modern technology with indigenous wisdom. Now this is I think one of the best books, most exciting adventure stories you're ever going to read, and it's not a movie. I don't know why. It's about Cabeza de Vaca, which means cowhead, okay? But he was the first person to travel across North America and meet the indigenous, and I don't remember when it was, late 1400s or something. I mean, it was just the most mind-blowing story you've ever heard. He's basically naked and barefoot walking, becomes a healer. I mean, the story is unreal. So if you can get your hands on this, it's basically the first written reports of the indigenous in North America. Very, very interesting stuff. The indigenous really are responsible for these methods like forest gardening, okay? And if you look at the forests, the way they've been, well, we are starting to realize that these forests, including the rainforest, okay, have been engineered by the indigenous, right? It makes sense if you think about it. I mean, everything they need is there. They see little seedling plants that they like. They take them, they put them over here so they grow over here so the plant spreads. They only take what they need, right? So the plants are there next time. And before you know it, I mean, it's a beautiful thing. You can YouTube forest gardens that have existed. There's one that's, I think, 3,000 years old or 2,000 years. There's one older than that. You can find them. They do exist. So this is in relation to anarchy, philosophy of social ecology, okay? Ecological thinking. It's very, you know, it's hardcore stuff. I mean, this book, you can't even find it. I mean, it's, what is it? Black Rose Books. I think it's in Montreal. It's some heavy stuff, but it goes deep. It goes deep into it's theoretical stuff. It's not necessarily the most practical, but it has a lot of good examples. This is another one, social anarchism, right? The idea that there's social permaculture or whatever. Political anarchy, not. Check out the J.R.R. Tolkien quote. He wrote Lord of the Rings about anarchy, which is to say, the older he gets, the more he leans towards anarchy politically. Not to say whiskered men with bombs, meaning not guys who have beards and bombs, but really the idea that no one should be in charge of anyone else, and that the people, or what is it, not one in 1,000 is fit for the job, least of all those seeking it. So the people who are seeking to be in charge, usually those are the ones you don't want in charge, okay? So now this is fun stuff here. Day of the Triffids. This is an old science fiction, and I'll tell you, if you don't know this book and you like science fiction at all, I'd say you could say it's permaculture science fiction. Okay, it's about plants that maybe outcompete humans. I don't want to ruin it, but it's a great book. So this is Carl Jung, and if you're into social permaculture being a misnomer, whatever, understanding psychology, people, this, I mean, I think it's really valuable stuff, because you find that you can plant gardens and do all this, but it's really getting people to interact with the spaces and use the stuff. That's really what matters. Now, really cool local stuff. You can see the name on the bottom, no advertising, but this is Edible Medicinal Plants of Montreal, and I mean, you know, it's just text, but it's got every kind of weed, which you can easily find, you know, in Michigan. Plantain, purslane, dandelion. They're there. You know, you can get them too. So that's a little Lonnie Gamble ramble on books. I love books, right? My little permaculture collection, and I just want to say about adminning, I basically am hands off. If someone posts political things, people think that permaculture is gardening, but it's so much more than that. Okay, there's nothing that's outside the realm of permaculture. So if someone wants to post something and have a place to do that and have a conversation that is permaculture centric, then that's a good thing. Okay, if you don't want to have that discussion, you don't have to. But people often say, "What is this post doing here? I don't want this in the group." Look, I mean, if you want to know about gardening and all this stuff, there's other groups for that. But permaculture is a holistic design system for designing human spaces, and all of these things are included. There's nothing that's outside the realm of permaculture. Okay, so getting people past the superficial level of gardening and stuff like that, I know it's weird to say superficial, but on the outside, that's what it looks like, and it just goes way beyond that. So obviously, if people are rude or mean, you know, we don't want any of that kind of stuff. But those people get warnings or banned. To be honest, I don't watch the group that much. I'm anarchistic about that. I think that if there's a serious problem, then it'll be brought up. But this group isn't that big yet, and the main reason I made this video was so that when people, I'm going to add a bunch of people, and when they come into the group, this is a really long video, but consider it to be sort of a crash course. Okay, if you don't have your PDC, you know, there's a lot of information in this. So I'll spit a few more. One is permies.com. Often when I'm wanting to learn about anything in permaculture, right, I Google whatever it is I'm looking for, and then permies, or permies, and then a couple words. And the Permies forum, I mean, it hasn't really failed me yet, I would say. I mean, there's just so much discussion that's already gone on. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. It's already there. I encourage you to use permies.com. Another great resource I learned from Lonnie Gamble is Plants for a Future, okay, Plants for a Future, PFAF. So if I'm looking for a plant, I'll PFAF it, PFAF. I'll Google PFAF and then the plant, okay? Or you just go to PFAF and check it out, because the guy's in England. And you know what's funny is actually in this book, was it in this one? Yeah, in the back of one of these edible forest gardens is references of other books, and one of the things that is said by Dave Jackie, and Tonesmeyer is part of this as well. One of the things that's mentioned is that the guy from PFAF, I don't know his name, that some of the things that he likes, that he thinks are good, that taste good, that necessarily not everyone agrees with that. Okay, I mean, big deal. You can figure it out for yourself, but the database is there. I mean, it has the plants according to how medicinal they are, how they taste, all the propagation details. It's just a completely invaluable resource. So check it out, give money to it, whatever. And yeah, thanks again to Darren Anderson. And of course, Mike Hoag, the Hoag, Hoag. So Darren Anderson is doing probably, he's the only permaculturist I really found in Genesee County. I don't know how fair that is to say, but he's, it's funny. That's why I mentioned about being inspired by him, because he felt like he hadn't even had he had no PDC and he had no official training or whatever, but he's doing it. I mean, when I went over there, I was astounded at all the stuff this guy's doing. It's really heartfelt stuff, and it's hardcore design. It's edibles, it's goats, it's cats. I mean, it's really, really cool stuff. So, hell of a nice guy. If you're in Genesee County, I would recommend hitting that guy up. He's a busy guy, but if you can, do it. And he also is part of the watershed group you can find. Mike Hoag is probably one of the biggest contributors to permaculture that I have seen. Not just what he does personally, but his posting. I mean, the pure amount of posts that he does, answers questions. I talk to him from now and again here and there, but just to find out behind the scenes the stuff he's doing. I mean, he's not making a big deal of it, but this guy is really doing a lot of work for the movement. And follow him, pay him money. Like, I'm telling you, in Michigan, there are other permies I've met that are great, very, very experienced, know a lot of things. But Mike's been doing it a very long time, and he's probably, I would say, in pure output, I mean, I haven't seen anyone to match him anywhere in the world, okay? In terms of the amount of text that this guy is putting out, I mean, it's amazing. So thanks to Mike Hoag, and thanks to Missa, his sister, because I actually know his sister a lot better than him. She was one of our biggest volunteers when I was in Flint. So she's done a lot of wheelbarrowing, a lot of heavy logs, doing hugelkultures. She's a good friend of mine, and Missa, if you're watching this, you're probably not, but I love you and I miss you. So thanks again to anyone who's part of the Permaculture Design Michigan. Appreciate questions and comments and posts. If you're in the group, introduce yourself, all that good stuff, and happy designing. And yeah, we got a long winter ahead and looking forward to the spring. So talk to you soon. Bye-bye.